All right, in this video, I'm gonna walk you through step by step my ultimate maximum degen 20-for-1 airdrop route. Now, before I get into this, I do need to stress that this is risky. There's a lot of things that could go wrong because I'm layering on so many levels of smart contract and also a little bit of liquidation risk. So for anybody watching this, this is definitely not financial advice. This is super risky. Exercise extreme caution, and if you plan on doing any portions of this, you should do your own research. Now, before I walk you through step by step how I'm actually going to be playing this, let me give you just a brief overview of what the core strategy here is. So this whole airdrop route does revolve largely around Eigenlayer and the future Eigen token. They have a massive amount of funding. They most recently raised $100 million, but they have total funding over $164 million. They're valued in the billions, and they have backing from pretty much every big name in the crypto space. And so Eigenlayer and the Eigen airdrop form sort of the core portion of this strategy, but then I'm layering on also liquid restaking tokens, liquid staking tokens, a bunch of different L2s, and a bunch of applications that are also going to be dropping tokens. So this right here, column I, is a list of all of the airdrops that I will theoretically be hitting with this strategy. And I'm gonna post a link to this Google Sheet so you can access it for yourself if you want to check it out. And there's gonna be two main phases to this strategy. The first part is what I'm calling bridging and L2s and also interacting with a couple of different applications. And then the second phase is looping and leveraging up on those LRTs. Now, when it comes to phase one, that's sort of optional and a bonus on this. And the reason why I decided to add it on is because I'm starting with a pool of 1.5 ETH, and I figured before I actually loop this, leverage up on it, and then lock it into restaking, I might as well bridge it around a few times and interact with a few different L2s and different apps and protocols just to actually get some volume before I then go and commit it for probably a minimum of a couple of months to this Eigenlayer restaking strategy. And so I tacked on a bunch of bridges. I'm gonna hit a bunch of different L2s that don't have tokens and a few applications. Now, in this portion of the strategy or the route, you could also add on basically unlimited things the more times that you bridge it and the more times that you swap or interact with different applications. The total pool of capital will probably decrease a little over time because you spend money on transaction fees. You might take some slippage on swaps and things like that. So I am keeping it as is, and this is a 20-for-1 strategy. You could have it and just get rid of all of phase one and move straight to phase two, or you could even just bump it up and actually add multiple additional apps and L2s and bridges into this. Oh, and before I get started, one important thing to mention is that this strategy is going to end up on the mode L2. So after I've done a bunch of bridging and interacted with a couple of apps, I'm going to send it all to mode, and that's where I'm going to do most of the looping and leveraging. However, in order to actually start collecting mode airdrop points and to keep track of your position for the airdrop, you need to bridge at least one time with their official bridge, and unfortunately, that has to be from the Ethereum mainnet. So I've already done that, and I'm not going to do it again here because I don't want to spend about $50 in gas fees. If you have never bridged to mode and started working on that airdrop, you should do this first, but it's only once you bridge using the official mode bridge that you get access to their airdrop tab here. And if you do want to bridge to mode, I recommend waiting until the gas fees are as low as possible. So this website here, Ultrasound Money, shows you sort of the gas trends over the last 70 days, or you can even zoom out to 30 days. And so you can try and time your transactions and wait for a good time to actually push this bridge through from the mode official bridge. But then afterwards, if you want to use a different bridge from a layer 2 to mode, that's going to cost you probably like $1, so you'll save a huge amount of money on that. All right, so I'm starting off on base, and I'm going to send my ETH to the Optimism network, but I'm going to select here this Stargate route. So it costs a little bit more, but that will allow me to tick off two things here on my checklist for Jumper and also layer 0. Oh, and by the way, I did include base here in the list of tokenless L2s that I'm hitting, although I am quite skeptical that they'll be dropping a token at any point soon. Anyways, let's start this bridge transaction and send it through the Stargate, which hits layer 0. And if you want to try and save gas when you do these transactions, you can always go into your wallet and select the low priority gas fee option. Might take a little bit longer, but you save maybe a couple of cents, sometimes multiple dollars. All right, now my transaction went through, so I'm gonna go over to my next bridge, which is going to be the Bungee exchange, and send it from Optimism to ZK Sync. So each time I take a small amount in slippage, it's maybe $1 or $2 per transaction, but that's not too bad. Now, Optimism isn't on the list of tokenless L2s right here because they've already had 3 rounds of their airdrop, but I will use a couple of different networks like that just for convenience sake. Anyways, now I've used Bungee to go to ZK Sync, so I guess I'll put a little mark here. Okay, now that transaction's got through, I've got my assets on the ZK Sync Era network, and I'm going to use the SyncSwap application, which is a decentralized exchange that you can use to make trades or swaps on ZK Sync, but also a couple of different networks as well. And one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click here on this little gas icon, and I'm going to use the Paymaster feature. So this is one of the unique features of ZK Sync, is that you can pay for transactions using different tokens. So I'm going to select USDC because I already have a tiny amount of that in my wallet here. And since I've been actively using this wallet for many months now, I have sort of little residual assets on each chain. So it makes it easier for me to do this. You don't have to use the Paymaster feature if you are trying to follow along here, but it could be related to the airdrop. It could be some sort of qualifier or multiplier. And it's probably a good idea to use it at least once in a while if you're on ZK Sync. So I'm going to make a swap now from ETH to USDC, and I'm going to pay for that transaction using the small amount of USDC I have in the wallet to trigger that. Okay, so it looks like I would take basically a $17 hit on this transaction from slippage. Let's see if I swap into USDT, if it would be any better. No, it's worse, okay. All right, well, I'm gonna do it anyways for the purpose of this video. This isn't an ideal situation to take that amount of slippage. Probably since I'm using so much capital, it's having a much bigger price impact. And I guess this is another important point. I am starting with about $5,000 worth of capital, 1.5 ETH. You could probably do this with less, although when I get to the looping and restaking portion of it, when I'm actually leveraging up on that, I wanted to start with a decent amount because you're only usually allowed to borrow something like 80% of the total value of your collateral. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a decent amount to start with because by the end, it's gonna sort of get whittled down, as you'll see. All right, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and push this transaction through because it's gonna greatly increase my volume on ZK Sync, even though I am taking a pretty big hit. I'll do it for science here. So let's hit swap and confirm the transaction. Now, if you are transacting with a smaller amount, you will probably have less slippage. All right, next I decided to actually add yet another step to this by going over to the Mute application, which is another DEX on ZK Sync. I'm gonna swap that USDC into USDT, which thankfully is gonna take pretty much 0 slippage. And each time I make one of these transactions, I'm basically adding $5,000 worth of volume to my volume count for each network or application that I'm interacting with. And then finally, I'm gonna go over to ZK Swap and swap from USDT back into ETH. Now, I was planning on actually potentially bridging from Rango directly to Scroll, but the amount of slippage was honestly unacceptable, so I figured it's probably better if I just swap back into ETH, but now that's $15,000 in transaction volume on the ZK Sync network using 3 different apps. And as you can see here with this transaction, the amount of slippage is pretty minimal, so I'm only down a small amount from what I started with. Also, most apps on ZK Sync have enabled the Paymaster feature, so you can interact with that as often as you like. All right, let's go ahead and make this swap, and then I'm gonna bridge from ZK Sync over to Scroll. And that routing, by the way, swapping between a bunch of different apps and then changing the token each time, is to try and prevent my wallet from being flagged as Sybil, because obviously it's kind of an unnatural behavior, just swapping the same amount of money back and forth. All right, now I've decided to use the Owl2 Finance bridge to go from ZK Sync over to Scroll, and actually I have to send it in 2 separate transactions because the amount that I've got is too big for the Owl2 bridge. Now the transaction fee for this is 0.001 ETH, so it's not too bad. And I could also use the Paymaster feature here, although I don't have any USDC left, so I'm gonna have to send this in 2 transactions. All right, so we used Owl2 on ZK Sync. All right, I do need to add a couple of rows in here and include also Mute, which is now actually renamed to Koi, and then ZK Swap as well. So this has become a 22 for 1 airdrop. Now, I'm also going to make a couple of swaps on Scroll, which is going to be exactly the same as what I sort of did for ZK Sync. I'm just going to choose the route that optimizes for minimal slippage and transaction fees. So I'm going to probably use Sync Swap on Scroll as well. I'm not going to do the whole thing on screen because that'll take too long. So I'll be back in a sec. All right, I'm finished on Scroll, and just to give you a quick recap, what I did was I swapped from ETH to staked ETH, Lido staked ETH on SyncSwap. Then I swapped from Lido staked ETH to wrapped ETH using XY Finance. And then I went from wrapped ETH back to ETH on Space Finance. That last transaction probably did not count. And this route was actually a little bit higher slippage than I was expecting. I think since I'm using so much capital and these are relatively new dApps, there's probably not enough liquidity. So if you're trying to do this with multiple ETH, it might be a little bit difficult. The next step where we actually leverage up on LRTs, there's no real cap on that, but when it comes to actually swapping, there's sometimes liquidity issues on some of these dexes on L2s. So something to keep in mind. If you're using like 0.1 ETH, probably not an issue. All right, I'm almost done with this. Now I'm gonna go from scroll to Zora, and then I'm gonna go from Zora to Mantle and Mantle to Mode. There's a method to my madness. All right, so for my next bridge transaction, I'm going from scroll to Zora using Orbiter Finance, which gives me a check mark here. So now that that has gone through, let me open up Zora. Yeah, I have my ETH here. So what we're gonna do is go over to the Zora application and we're going to mint one NFT. Now, if you've never minted my Cove Zorb, you can definitely go and mint one of those. But since I already have one, I'm just gonna go to the trending page on Zora and see what I can find. Actually, no, you know what? In my Discord, we've actually got a Zora channel where people are sharing their mints. So I guess I'm gonna mint this one right here and help out one of the people from my Discord. Now, the reason why we're doing this is because I do think Zora is gonna have a token at some point, and it definitely makes sense to come back maybe once a month or once a week if you have more capital and mint one of these NFTs. They're usually free, plus the Zora mint fee, which is 0.000777 ETH. So I'm gonna mint this right here, and then we're gonna move on to the next step. All right, cool. I've minted Lily the cat. Cute. So now here under Zora, I can put a little mark. Oops, I meant to use Ambient Finance on Scroll. That was dumb. So Ambient Finance is another great DEX on Scroll, and I've already replaced it with a bunch of other ones, but you could definitely use Ambient Finance instead of SpaceFi or XY Finance. That was a bit of an oversight on my part. All right, cool. We are almost done now. I've just got a couple more bridges to tick off, Rango and D-Bridge. Then I'm gonna go to Mantle, do a bunch of stuff, and then we're gonna end up on Mode. All right, well, Orbiter Finance wants me to take a massive haircut on bridging out. So I'm going to use OWL2, and I'm gonna have to do 3 transactions, unfortunately, but it's still gonna be cheaper. Yeah, it's gonna be significantly cheaper. Okay, so I'm gonna bridge 3 times on OWL2 from Zora to Arbitrum, and then we'll keep going. All right, that was pretty quick. So now I've got my ETH on Arbitrum, and I just want to hit these last couple of bridges before we go to Mantle. So let's go over to D-Bridge because there's not that many options. I'm gonna go from Arbitrum to Polygon. Okay, yeah, so Arbitrum to wrapped ETH on Polygon, and then we'll go from Polygon over to the Rango bridge. Then I'll send that 1.5 ETH from Polygon over to Avalanche using the Rango exchange. And this kind of actually obscures and obstructs because it swaps to a bunch of different tokens. So it doesn't look as obviously like I'm just taking this same ETH and sending it all around. Now, in order to do this, you would also need to have gas tokens on both Polygon and Avalanche, which is Matic and AVAX. And actually, I'm going to cancel this transaction halfway through. I've got now USDC on Avalanche, so I'm going to reject the swap into wrapped ETH because now I can go over to Stargate Finance and bridge that USDC from Avalanche over to Mantle. This is the second to last network that we're going to be on. So let's send all of that USDC over to Mantle, and then we're going to start the leveraged looping process. And this is where it gets really interesting. Up until this point, basically I've just been pushing buttons to try to run up volume on some of these bridges and applications and different L2s. But now this is where we're going to take it to the next level. So I get another interaction with Stargate or layer 0. So I guess I'll just put it here in this category. And now I've hit every bridge and every L2 that I intended to hit. Well, aside from Mode, which is going to be the final step. All right, so this is the situation now. In MetaMask on the Mantle L2, I have 5,127 USDC. And what the strategy is here is to now swap that into Mantle ETH, ticker symbol METH, which is a liquid staked ETH token on Mantle that earns a high yield of about 7%. But that is not all. because Mantle has confirmed that they have taken 100,000 mETH and they're going to pay out Eigenlayer rewards to holders of mETH because they have restaked it with Eigenlayer. And so what that means is that simply by holding Mantle ETH or mETH in our wallet, we're already earning an ETH staking yield, but we're also going to be earning Eigenlayer rewards. According to the Mantle team, a series of snapshots will be taken of wallets holding mETH on the L2, but also including wallets that use that token within the ecosystem applications. So this is great for us because what we're going to do now is leverage up on Mantle ETH. And each time we do that, we're going to get more Mantle ETH. We're going to earn more yield on that staking, and we're going to earn the Eigenlayer airdrop simply for doing that, even after depositing it into applications on the Mantle L2. And then we're going to take what's left over to Mode, and we're going to leverage up on liquid restaking tokens from Renzo, Easy ETH. And so combined, we're going to get a massive exposure to ETH staking yield and to the Eigenlayer airdrop, as well as the liquid restaking token airdrop from Renzo. So this is huge, but that is not all, because it's also been confirmed that there's going to be additional rounds of the Mantle or the MNT token airdrop. And by simply holding the mETH token on the Mantle network, probably going to qualify us for some Mantle by interacting with Mantle applications like the DeFi apps that we're going to deposit and use leverage on. That's going to qualify us for some Mantle. And then also there's this meme coin on Mantle called Puff. And it's been confirmed that holders of mETH on the Mantle L2 are also going to get airdrops of this Puff token. And this is a super interesting meme coin. It's not just going to be completely valueless. It's actually got massive liquidity pools for Mantle ETH as well as for USDT. And it's going to have some utility within the ecosystem as well. So already this is looking pretty good, even before we get to the Mode step, because by leveraging up on Mantle and mETH, we're going to be getting multiple additional airdrops. Now, in order to do this, we first need to actually swap our USDC into mETH. And there's a couple of different dexes that we can use. There's Izumi Finance, there's also Merchant Mo. And so what I would probably recommend doing is checking to see which one of these has the best liquidity and is going to give you the best result after slippage. So it looks like for my USDC, I can get 1.44 Mantle ETH on Merchant Mo, 1.443 actually technically, and over on Izumi Finance, I'm going to get 1.441. So it looks like the offer is slightly better on Merchant Mo. However, Izumi Finance doesn't have a token yet. They have an iPoint system on, and Merchant Mo does have a token. And so for that reason, even though the price is slightly better on Merchant Mo, I'm still going to use Izumi Finance. Also, another important thing to note is that the gas token on the Mantle L2 is not ETH, it's Mantle or MNT. So just like with AVAX or Matic, you're going to need to have some of this. I'm lucky because I've already interacted with this network. If you don't have any Mantle tokens on the Mantle network, you can use a refuel feature like gas.zip, and this actually also interacts with the Layer 0 protocol. And what you can do here is send a small amount of money between different L2s. So if you need to get a little bit of MNT on the Mantle network, if you need to get a little bit of AVAX on the Avalanche chain, then you can use this feature. Anyways, back over here, since I already have the Mantle tokens and I'm ready to make this swap, I'm going to trade my USDC for mETH. Oh, and by the way, an important thing to note is you'll see that I'm getting only 1.44 mETH for this. It's not because I've taken slippage of 0.06, which would be quite a lot, but it's because Mantle staked ETH actually accrues value over time from that 7% ETH staking yield. So what that means is the token becomes more valuable over time. And so if I go to make this swap later on, I'll get even less for it. That's why it's looking like I'm taking so much slippage. It's actually not that bad, although between all of these different bridges and swaps, I've definitely probably lost a decent chunk of this. And even now for this transaction, since I'm using so much, it's taking a liquidity fee of $17, almost $18. Oh, and one more pro tip here. If you go to make swaps on the Mantle network and you notice that the gas is actually really high, like it's asking you to pay multiple MNT tokens, click on this little icon here and then go to Advanced and make sure that you set your gas fees to the low option. So you can select the max base fee as 0.02 MNT and the priority fee can be 0. and that's going to save you a huge amount on transaction fees. These transactions should be costing a fraction of a penny. It shouldn't be costing multiple MNT tokens. All right, so the swap went through, and now I've combined all of that with the other mETH that I already had on Mantle. So now I have 1.64 mETH, and that's what I'm going to be using from this point forward. I'm just going to roll it all together. So the next step is to take this mETH and leverage up on it. So there's a couple options on Mantle to do this. We can use the Lendl platform. We could use the Aurelius platform. Both of these are going to allow us to deposit mETH, but I'm going to be using Lendl because I've already tested it out, and it looks like borrow mETH against my mETH, which is a super convenient way to leverage up. And for doing so, I'm going to be earning this lend token reward from the Lendl platform. And the more that you deposit and borrow, the more tokens you earn. So I'm going to start by depositing my ETH to Lendl. So I'm going to click on the supply button here and supply the maximum amount of mETH that I have. And this is great because I'm hitting another airdrop, and this still qualifies as having that mETH on the Mantle network to qualify for Eigenlayer airdrop from Mantle, the Mantle token, and the Puff token as well. Now, this is the part where it's getting a little bit riskier though. So up until this stage, bridging and transacting on different dexes, there are risks associated with that, of course, but when we're using applications like this, where I'm basically giving my tokens to Lendl, I'm approving them and supplying them, there is smart contract risk here. If this platform gets hacked, I, of course, could lose my assets. And if there's some sort of black swan depegging event, even though I'm going to be borrowing correlated assets against my mETH, there is a possibility that there could be a liquidation event triggered. Anyways, I have assessed the risks. I'm comfortable with this platform and I'm going to do it. But if you want to do anything like this, I highly, highly recommend doing your own research. Anyways, I have now supplied the full amount of my mETH, so 1.64 mETH to the platform. Now, this is earning me a very, very small supply APY of 0.023%. It's earning me 0.39% in the form of the Lend token rewards and also that staking APY of about 7.49%. Now, the next step is to scroll down here over to the borrow section, and I can actually borrow against the value of the mETH that I just deposited. It's not going to allow me to borrow 100% of it because it wants you to maintain a healthy loan to value ratio. But since I'm borrowing a correlated asset, I could borrow mETH or wrapped ETH and then swap into more mETH and then deposit that onto the platform. But since it's going to allow me to just directly borrow mETH here, I might as well just go ahead and do that. So I'll hit borrow and then select max and then maybe just decrease that by a little bit for extra margin of safety. So the health factor of my loan is 1.14 and the liquidation is at less than 1. Now, for a liquidation to be triggered here, basically there would have to be, like I said, a massive black swan event where there's like a major issue with the price oracle, because this is literally the exact same asset. And now you can see I've supplied 1.6 and borrowed 1.25, but I can supply more now. So I'll just supply the full amount of what I just borrowed. And so now I've deposited 2.9 mETH, and according to all of these snapshots for Mantle, it will be like I have that amount of mETH in my wallet. And I could even do this again and keep looping it, but I do want to save some of the cap space here for when we get over to mode. So instead of borrowing more mETH, I'm actually going to borrow now some wrapped ETH, because I won't be able to send the mETH over to mode. Unfortunately, that asset is, at least so far, not compatible with the mode L2. So I'm going to borrow one wrapped ETH, and that is what I'm going to continue this route with over on mode. All right, so this is the state of my dashboard now. I've supplied 2.9 mETH. I've borrowed one wrapped ETH and 1.25 mETH. So I've almost maxed out my borrow capacity. The health factor of this loan is 1.13. However, as long as there's not a major black swan event, this should be okay. That said, I cannot stress enough the risks associated with this, and that is why this is called the max degen airdrop farming route. Now, in terms of the interest, at least I'm earning a decent APY once I factor in the mETH staking yields. So technically, when I go to actually repay all of this, I should end up on top because I've supplied a lot more mETH than I've borrowed. However, when I go to actually unwind the position, first, I'm going to need to repay some of the loans before I can actually withdraw my initial capital. Anyways, now I have that one ETH in my wallet, so it's time to move on from Mantle It's been a pleasure. Now I'm going to be earning a lot of airdrops from the Mantle ecosystem, but it's time to focus on mode. Now, like I said at the beginning, you should have used the official mode bridge at least one time. But since I have already done that, I'm not going to bridge from ETH mainnet to mode because it's quite expensive. So I'm going to send my assets via one of these other bridges. I think Al2 Finance might end up being the cheapest, but I'll check a couple. Yeah, as far as I can tell, this on Al2 Finance is probably the best route to go from Mantle to mode. I'm gonna have to do 2 transactions because it's maximum 0.5 ETH per transaction, but that is okay. I'm running up more volume now for the Al2 Finance bridge. All right, I've transferred all of that ETH over to mode. So now I have 1.02 ETH on mode, and we're gonna take this to the next level. So in case you have absolutely no idea, mode is a new Ethereum L2. They have a points campaign on right now that they have explicitly said will result in an airdrop. And it's going to happen relatively soon, within the next couple of months. Now, the best ways to qualify for the mode airdrop are to bridge a lot of assets to mode via their actual official bridge, to hold some of these different assets on the network. And as you can see, there's actually a boost for holding restaked ETH from Renzo and EtherFi. And then also by using those assets within different apps within the ecosystem. So the strategy that we're going to do now is to take the ETH over to Renzo. We're going to select the mode L2 here, and we're going to restake all of our ETH for easy ETH. This is liquid restaked ETH from the Renzo protocol. In exchange for doing this, we are going to be accumulating eigenlayer points and Renzo easy points for the Renzo airdrop. Now, I already know there's going to be some comments of people saying that they're not seeing their points show up. So if I go over here to portfolio, you can see that currently L2 points are not updating, but rest assured they will be applied retroactively. So if you restake ETH on the mode L2 and you don't notice your points ticking up, don't worry, they'll come eventually. So I've already actually restaked a little bit of ETH for easy ETH, but now I'm going to do the full amount of what I have here and confirm this transaction in the wallet. All right, so that transaction went through. And now if I open up my wallet, I have that easy ETH. So this is already great. We're earning mode points, we're earning eigenlayer points and Renzo points. We're also earning all that stuff from the Mantle ecosystem. But now we can do the same thing we did on Mantle, but on the mode L2, which is to actually leverage up, deposit the asset, borrow against it, and then keep repeating that until we reach a level that we're satisfied with. Now, I wanted to do this on Ionic Money because I like this application. They have a point system on, and that is going to lead to an airdrop. So I've already got 10,000 points on Ionic, and I'm ranked 3,500. But the issue is I can't use it right now because the borrow caps have been hit. So I've already actually supplied some easy ETH to Ionic, but if I go to borrow wrapped ETH against it, it won't let me because the borrow cap is fully hit, 100%. So what I'm actually gonna do is withdraw my easy ETH from Ionic, and there's another platform that we can use on the mode L2 that will do the same thing. And that platform is Ironclad Finance. Ironclad is still one of the actual officially supported applications for the mode L2 airdrop. You get mode points for using it, and they are actually a lot newer. Their market size is smaller, and I went in their Discord and did a little bit of digging, and I found out that they're gonna have an Ironclad point system live within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and that was actually on March 9th. So the Ironclad point system should be live relatively soon, meaning that this is still potentially a solid airdrop target. Now, again, depositing into a platform like this layers on additional levels of smart contract risk, and when we leverage up, it adds on liquidation risk as well. And let's say theoretically that the Ironclad Finance platform rugs, the issue is I would probably not be able to go back to Mantle on the Lendo platform and repay my loan and withdraw those assets. So I could still lose all of these assets in sort of a cascading effect of either rugging on some app or platform or liquidation. So again, and I cannot stress this enough, there's high risk associated with this, and make sure that you go into the docs and you check out the team and make sure that you're comfortable with them. Oh, and by the way, also the Ironclad team has confirmed that by depositing easy ETH to the platform, you will still continue to earn mode points and the easy points for the Renzo airdrop, as well as those eigenlayer points. So let's go ahead, make the first step here, which is to deposit that easy ETH. So I'm gonna hit approve and supply here. So we're almost done now. The final part is just the looping. Now, I'm faced with a decision here because the borrow APY on ETH right now is currently 100% per year. However, I wouldn't keep this position open for a whole year. Probably only gonna have it open for maybe a month or two to farm these airdrops and then wind it up. And actually, what would be ideal is to get a decently sized airdrop and then sell some of that, repay the loans on these, and then withdraw the assets. That would be a lot easier than actually having to reverse engineer the entire process. Anyways, the borrow APY on the platform for these assets is not stable or fixed. It's variable based on the supply and demand. So currently, I guess more people want to borrow ETH than those that are supplying it. So the supply APY is going way up, but also the borrow APY is going way up. And theoretically then, people are going to see this opportunity, come in and supply ETH to take advantage of this really high APY, which will drive the price to borrow down. So that's the one side. On the other hand, I could borrow stables like USDC against this and then swap that into ETH and then go to Renzo and restake again. And the borrow APY on stables for USDC is only 3.8 or just below 4%, which is obviously a lot more attractive, meaning I'll probably pay like 1% interest for the time that I have this open maximum. But the issue with that is because I have supplied a variable asset and I would be borrowing stable coins, if the price of ETH goes way, way down, then theoretically I could be liquidated. On the other hand, if the price of ETH goes way up from here, then that would be amazing. Basically, I'm leveraged long Ethereum and I would have to still repay my loan in US dollars, which would be now cheaper for me to rebuy with the higher value of ETH. So that is the situation I'm currently faced with. I do think that somebody is going to take advantage of this opportunity, come in, supply ETH, and ideally drive the borrow APY of ETH down. And while I don't mind having long exposure to ETH, I'm not sure if this is the place where I would want to go leverage long. And so if I were to borrow USDC, I would have to borrow much less than the theoretical maximum that the platform would allow me in order for me to actually comfortably sleep at night and not be afraid of liquidation. So what I'm going to do is actually borrow some ETH, even though the APY on this is absolutely ridiculous, and have faith that someone is going to come take advantage of this arbitrage opportunity, supply ETH, and bring this APY down. Now, when it comes to borrowing from Ironclad Finance, you don't want to go maximum leverage all the way to the right. So I wouldn't want to have my health factor anywhere near liquidation. The maximum loan to value ratio on this platform is 70%. So let's say theoretically I want to borrow maybe 0.69 ETH. That's going to still be quite degen, but the health factor is very solid. And since ETH is correlated with easy ETH in price, there would have to be another major black swan event for this to be liquidated. The only issue is now I have to worry about that massive APY on the borrow. But we'll just borrow and then pray that the APY comes down. Although theoretically, even if it didn't come down, since I'm only going to have this position open for, let's say, maximum 2 months, that means I would pay a 20% interest to repay this loan, theoretically. And the idea is that we're going to get massive airdrops from farming all of these different apps and protocols, which would, I think, hopefully be a lot more than 20% of the value of this loan. So this should still be a positive EV play significantly. And actually, since I have borrowed ETH instead of the stable, I'm going to skip this last one on the list here, Kim Exchange. It doesn't actually make sense for me to swap into something like USDC because then I'd need to swap it again and then go back to Renzo. So since I added a couple of extra ones in here that I wasn't expecting, we'll delete Kim Exchange from the list. I'll take my new ETH back over to Renzo. We'll restake some more ETH with Renzo. Then we're going back over to Ironclad. We're going to supply the additional ETH that we just got from Renzo. Now I can go down here, borrow a little bit more ETH. So let's say 0.5 ETH this time. Then back over to Renzo once again. So you get the idea. This is how it works. And you can loop this as many times as you want. Obviously, each time the amount that you can then borrow decreases little by little. All right, so I looped that probably, I don't know, 8 to 10 times, and the end result is I've supplied 3.5 easy ETH to Ironclad, and I've borrowed 2.4. So my loan value is in the yellow. Should be fine unless there's some sort of major black swan event. Now let's recap everything I went through, talk about all the different airdrops that I hit, and talk about what I need to watch out for. So for starters, I definitely hope that the borrow APY on ETH on Ironclad goes down. Otherwise, holding this position open will be expensive, even though I'm only going to do it for a couple of months. That said, ideally these airdrops are going to be pretty substantial, so I should be able to cover it. Now, in terms of the risks here, obviously I need to pray that Ironclad does not rug. I need to monitor my health factor here. I need to also do the same with Lendl. Pray that this platform doesn't rug, and monitor the value of this loan as well. Then in terms of a quick recap of all of the different airdrops that I hit, I've got Ironclad, which has confirmed on Twitter that they're launching their points very soon. I've got Renzo with the easy points. I've got Eigenlayer exposure from Renzo. I've got the mode layer 2. Oh, and by the way, that process of looping through mode theoretically should be generating transaction volume as well, because I keep doing transactions with thousands of dollars. I've got Mantle, I've got Lendl with the Lend token, I've got MNT, I've got Puff, and also Eigenlayer exposure from holding and depositing mETH into this platform. And then going back over to the spreadsheet here, I've got all of these different dApps that I made swaps on. I've got Zora, the platform where I minted, and all of these different L2s, including Zora, but also ZK Sync, Scroll, and potentially maybe Base. So each time I made a transaction, I ran up the volume on those. And then we've got all of these different bridges that I hit at the beginning. So this is over 20 different airdrops with the same pool of capital. However, obviously it is very, very degen. I leveraged up quite heavily, and I am paying interest on the loan that I took on Ironclad that is ridiculously high. However, with the amount of volume that I moved through these bridges, on these different L2s, through these different dApps that I did swaps on, and then all of the exposure I have to Eigenlayer restaking points, as well as the Renzo Easy Points airdrop, I feel like this is pretty capitally efficient, and I'm going to get a lot of airdrops from this strategy. I am not necessarily recommending it for other people because there is so much risk involved in this. Smart contract risk, liquidation risk, and also theoretically the risk that I couldn't pay back the interest that I owe on the loans, although I do have other assets that I could pull into this situation if need be. If you are thinking of doing any part of this strategy, A, I recommend not using anywhere close to max leverage. B, probably holding some assets in reserve in case you need to top up to keep your loan to value ratio healthy, or to make sure that you have the capability to actually pay the interest on those loans. In total, I started with 1.5 ETH, but remember I did pick up 0.2 mETH on Mantle and about 0.15 easy ETH on the mode L2. So in total, I've got just under 2 ETH really at risk with this strategy. So that is it for today's video. Probably going to be the longest video I've ever produced for the channel. Thanks so much for watching if you made it this far, and see you later.